Hey guys, welcome back to my Practically Imperfect Life. I am back at it working on lesson planning for the upcoming school year. Quick recap on kind of what this series is about. Every year I like to sit down and I like to put in at least a general lesson plan for the year for each of the subjects my kids are going to be doing. That just helps me to kind of get an idea on how things are going to space out, when some of our major assignments are going to fall, how I need to kind of adjust things from one subject to the other in order to just give them a balanced school day. It's also really helpful so that way I can make sure that I'm prepared to help them with the different materials if there are things that I need to gather and have on hand, or if there's things I want to tweak with the different curriculum programs. And I know most of you are not using the exact same curriculum as me. Some of you might have one or two things that you're doing that are the same, but nobody's going to have the exact same lineup as I'm doing with my kids. But I'm going to show you the strategies. How is it that I look at these different things? Where do I find the information that I need in order to lay out lesson plans? And how do I get it organized? So hopefully by going through this, it'll give you a couple of tips and tricks on how you can tackle this with your own students. Now again, I like to plan out the whole year if possible, with the exception of a few subjects. And you might choose to just plan a few weeks at a time, maybe a quarter at a time, half a year at a time, however you choose to lay it out. And some of you might just want to kind of open and go with your curriculum, and that is fine too. It's homeschooling, guys. Do what works best for you. But I'm going to show you the things that I'm doing. So in the first video of this, we were working on my son's history, which is an activity and literature-based program from Guest Hollow. I talked in that video how I plan out 6 weeks of it at a time in that curriculum. And then what I really did was kind of look ahead and see like what time periods we were going to be hitting in different weeks or in different months, because I'm working on literature today for him. We have decided to move away from a formal literature program. We had been using BJU for him for years, and if you want to know more details on why we're making the switch to what we're doing now, I have my curriculum review videos from last year you can check out. I really deep dived into all of the different subjects and the programs that we used and what we liked and didn't like about them. So I tried to give as much information as I could on there. And then in my curriculum choice videos for this year, I went over what exactly it is we're using. But he is going to be doing different novel studies for this whole year. So we're going to be just reading books and doing different novel studies that I have purchased. Almost all of these I found through Teacher Pay Teachers, and I can link them if you guys are interested in the different ones that we are using. I don't know how much we're going to like each and every one of them. I tried to find ones that hit certain criteria that I'm looking for, and I'll kind of show you that as I'm going through and doing the planning. But it creates a unique challenge when you're using novel studies to plan out your year versus a formal curriculum. When we had been using like BJU, for example, the teacher guide on there gave a very detailed breakdown on what you should be doing on what days in order to put it into an entire school year. With novel studies, sometimes when you purchase them, they will give a recommendation on how to break it down, but a lot of them break these down for like a month at a time or just a certain number of weeks. There's a few I purchased that recommend like a 5-day study. And, you know, sometimes I will take that kind of with a grain of salt, like I'll follow it to a degree, but I also have to remember that a lot of the material you find on Teacher Pay Teachers is designed to be used in a classroom setting. So there'll be activities and things included in those packets that are meant to be done with a group of kids, which is great if you're doing this at a co-op, but when you're just doing it with one student, you've got to make some adjustments in order to just accommodate the fact that you're just doing this one-on-one with one of your kids. We have always done novel studies. Ever since, I think when we hit middle school, I really wanted to make sure that they were reading full books at least a couple times a year. Formal curriculums are great, but they're showing excerpts from books, or they're doing a lot of poetry and short stories and essays and things like that. And those things are important to read, but there's just something that I think you can gain from reading a full novel and really seeing how an author puts, you know, the story together. You can find lots of great examples of lots of literary devices within one book. You can analyze plot structure and character development and mood, and it gives the opportunity for you to have your student, you know, show their understanding in lots of different ways, whether that's writing a paper, taking a test, doing a book report. I mean, the sky's the limit as far as ways that you can test your student on it. So I had always adjusted our schedule before with the BJU programs to accommodate a few novel studies a year. But now I just have a lineup of books and these, and I'm trying to somewhat match it up with what we're studying in history. So he is doing American History Year 1. So we're starting with like the discovery of the Americas and going through about the 1900s. And in that program, in the guest hollow program, there had been some recommendations for what they called like unscheduled reading assignments, and even some of novels that were part of the schedule. And I figured, well, these are really great books, and if he was going to read them for history anyways, why don't we use them for literature instead? So we're going to read these, and I wanted to try to keep it somewhat in line with what topics he's covering in his history. And so that's where I kind of came up with this little list. So I made a list. I put weeks 1 through 35, kind of left off week 36 so we'd have like a buffer week, so to speak. And I put down an idea of how many weeks I thought we needed to spend on the different books and novels that he's going to be reading. So some of them we're doing for just 2 weeks. There's a few things that are just for a week at a time. A lot of these are spread out over 3 weeks. And then I even built in some buffer books. For example, he is going to do a novel study on the adventures of Huckleberry Finn. I have right after that the adventures of Tom Sawyer. But if it looks like we are kind of falling behind a little bit, then we will cut out Tom Sawyer and we'll just do Huckleberry Finn. Or if like we need more time to finish those things. But if we're on track and doing great, then I'll have him read it, and instead of doing like a full novel study, I'll have him read it and maybe just do a book report. And then the last one for the year is the Children's Blizzard, which I really do want him to read because it sounds like a really interesting book. But I didn't purchase a novel study for it, so if we get down near the end of the year, and again, if we need a little extra time, then we'll just cut that one out, or we'll just do it and do a book report. So that's kind of my plan thus far. But each of these novel studies that I purchased, and I printed them off, and I put them in a binder for him. What I did is like I printed off like a cover page, and then all of the pages for the packet. Some of them I printed off everything that was provided. Some of them I picked and chose like what it was we were going to use. But I've got it all in here for him for the whole year. Everything is printed out that he would need. What is included for each of these novel studies is different, and I did not get all of them from the same like creator on Teacher Pay Teachers. One, because there was no one creator who had something for all of these books, but also like I would find a few novel studies that I really liked on a given novel from one person and a few I really liked from another. So there's a couple of that are repeats from certain creators, but it's a lot of mix and match. And it definitely took some time to kind of go through and find ones that I like. But if you're only trying to incorporate, 1 or 2 novel studies for the year, there's so many great ones online. I mean, there's a lot of people who've just created some really fabulous resources. How do I get started? First of all, I get the packets printed off, right? So I have them all handy. I have my laptop, so that's got my digital lesson planner. All my books just fell. My digital lesson planner. So I'm using the one that I created this year. I've shown that a couple of times, and it's available to purchase if you'd like it. So I'll be entering in things onto here as I get done. And then I have the books. Now, why have the books on hand? Well, I want to see how long the books are, flip through them a little bit, check how the number of chapters, and get a feel for how long realistically will it take to read this book. Because, a book like Common Sense, which is really not a book, it's a series of essays, right? It's short, right? The autobiography of Ben Franklin, also short. Something like Huckleberry Finn, little bit longer, but none of them are, exceptionally long. The other thing I like to do is kind of get a feel for the difficulty of the reading. So I'm actually currently reading the autobiography of Ben Franklin. I try to go through and read the books that I'm going to assign. And while it is short, it's one of those books that sometimes takes a second read through to really understand it. Like you'll read a sentence and you might have to reread that 1 or 2 more times to really understand. Ben Franklin is very witty in his writing. It's very entertaining. If you've not read it, I recommend it. But he loves very long sentences, and obviously the verbiage is different from what we're used to. So even for me, an experienced reader, I had to kind of go back and check over some things a few times to make sure I had full understanding. Even though it's a short book, I know it's going to be a challenging book for my son. And so I want to keep that in mind as we're planning things out. I thought, I'm not going to take through every single novel, but I thought what I would do is show you kind of what I was going to be looking for in different novel studies, and then how it is I start to kind of create a schedule and some assignments for him to do. So we'll flip the camera on here so you can kind of see what I'm looking at, and we'll try to get this all done. Apologies if this is not the best angle to see everything. I'm trying to make sure that I'm not creating too many shadows or getting my hands in the way, but we are starting off with The Crucible, which is actually a play, not a novel. So the reading of it is a little bit different. I mean, you're mostly reading just straight dialogue with a few sections where it's, giving stage directions and things like that. But essentially, it's a play. And so I don't think it will be I think it will be a quick read for him. I think he'll be able to work through it at a pretty steady tick. I do have it planned to work on this over 2 weeks. So 10 days, essentially, to get it all done. I've printed off the packet from here. There was quite a lot of really neat add-ons included in this particular purchase. So this was from Simply Novel on Teacher Pay Teachers. And I sort of grouped things when I put them in here. So there's information on the author. So they have a page about him, well, a page and a half. And then there are comprehension checked questions that are related to this reading about the author. So I definitely think that, learning about the author is great, and then just answering the questions. There is a section on elements of a drama, so just some understandings about what it is he's reading. And then some bonus pieces of information to give some background on what it is he's going to be reading about. So Puritan religion and beliefs, and again, there's like a comprehension check. Witchcraft in Puritan England, again, another type of comprehension check. So I did like that this had different types of assessments. So there's some, multiple choice, some fill-in, and then, let's see, religious beliefs in the Salem witch trials, and then some things kind of related then to the story itself. So there's a character map, just something to kind of fill out and get an idea of who's who in the story and how they all relate to one another. Then it gets into questions about specific parts of the book. And this is kind of, for me, this is sort of the literary analysis part of it. So for here, Act 1, elements of a drama and the author's choices. So it gives some initial things for him to read, highlights some specific vocabulary. And then after you read Act 1, you're supposed to come in and start to, answer some of these different questions. There is a section for Act 1 on characterization. And so on that one, it breaks down the different characters, and then you're finding some main information to fill in about them. Act 3 looks at types of conflict. So this is a theme that he's seen many times in past literature programs, but man versus man versus himself, man versus nature, man versus society, man versus fate. So what is going on? And are these external or internal conflicts? Act 4, tragedy and the tragic hero. So yet another key theme. And then there are just straightforward comprehension and analysis questions. So you can see there's quite a bit, right? So, and that's what the majority of the rest of this is. There are sample tests, which I did print off. You can use these or not use these. That's kind of what the end is. I think there was a project idea too, but I didn't print that off. I just printed off the final test. But this whole section here is all just actual, did you read it and did you understand the basics? And so the way I look at different novel studies is I do want there to be some of this. I always want there to be something where I can do a quick check and assure that they've done the reading and they understand it. And so these types of comprehension analysis questions are great for being able to see that, because you can't answer these if you haven't read it. He needs to fill these out kind of as he's reading. But I also look for these novel and unit studies to include something that teaches more about the different literary devices or themes and things like that that you're going to find within a novel. And different novels are going to have different key things that you can pull from it. And so I really liked this unit study because it had both of those pieces, and I could kind of, match things up. So I'm planning to have the acts kind of broken down. He's reading Act 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. And as he's reading, he's going to fill out these comprehension questions. But I also want to work in him doing these different sections here on the different acts and like these key focuses that you're going to see. My thought process is, since we have 10 days, is I definitely want him to do some of this introductory work first. I want him to read about the author and at least read about elements of a drama. I think that might be a good, 1 day type of deal for him to do. Maybe even working in like the Puritan religion and beliefs. So like he'd do those 3 things, and the assignment and call that a day. And then do the witchcraft in Puritan England, and then the religious beliefs in the Salem witch trials. So essentially it's like 2 days of introduction before we even really get into the story at all. The other thing I would like to try to do is I want to pop onto YouTube and I want to see if I can find a good video that gives maybe like an overall synopsis of the story or a little bit of background on the story. Some sort of an intro video and something that maybe gives, like I said, a general synopsis. So as he's going in, he kind of has an idea on what the general storyline is. So I think that's going to be 2 days out of our 10. And then I know that the very last day, I will likely have him do the final test. So that's 3 out of our 10 days already kind of taken up, which gives us 7 days to do all of the other parts. So that's where having the novel on hand is helpful because I can kind of get a feel for how long the different sections are. So probably we need to plan for 2 days for each of Act 1, 2, and 3. And then 1 day for Act 4. So that's 2 days in order to get it read, do the comprehension question, and do whatever the sheet is. Now, if I was spacing this out more, like if I was going to do it over 3 weeks, I would probably do 2 days of reading and comprehension questions, and then do on the 3rd day, just have the assignment from in here. But I think he'll be able to manage it fine, especially, since we're early in the school year and his other workloads are going to be pretty light to start things off. So that is what I think we're going to do in order to space this out over the 2 weeks. So 2 days of introduction with some sort of an introduction and summary video. And then he'll read Act 1 over 2 days. So that'll be days 3 and 4. He'll do the Act 1 elements of a drama and the author's choices, right? So he'll need to do that, and he'll do characterization. So he'll fill those out probably on the 2nd day. Then he'll do the comprehension questions as he's going through. If it looks like, it's a bit much, then, again, we can flex. If he needs an extra day to be able to, work on, say, this portion of it, then we'll push it and we'll do this over 3 weeks instead of 2 weeks. And we'll just see how it goes. But that's how I will initially plan it. And then, we'll just kind of go from there and see what happens. So that is the Crucible. Now I'm going to skip a couple. I want to show you some of these shorter ones that I've purchased that are designed to be done over like a 5-day period, just so you can kind of see the difference in these. He's going to be reading Common Sense and the Autobiography of Ben Franklin. Studies are designed to be 5-day studies. And what I did is I spread them out over 2 weeks. So these both come from Teach with Mark and Elise. They have a ton of really neat ones. In fact, I got a whole bunch of poetry ones for them for the end of the year. But they're supposed to be like 5-day mini studies. And this is an example of one that had a ton of stuff that was very, very much geared towards a classroom. Like there were bell ringers and exit tickets, if you're familiar with those terms. Those are things that a lot of teachers use in their classrooms. There were some ideas for like group activities and things like that. So I really just kind of pulled the stuff that was going to be pertinent to do with my student. I do like that they have like a biography research organizer, and it's not, hey, here's the information. It's, hey, here's some questions. Go do your research and find out about the author. So background will definitely be one day, like find out about Thomas Paine, and then when we do the Ben Franklin book, find out about him. There are vocabulary reviews, and while we are doing a vocabulary curriculum, you're going to come across words that you just aren't familiar with in these books, and so it's important to be able to understand them. So I like that, you know, there's vocabulary. There's an anticipation guide as well, and this I thought was kind of interesting because it's, you know, just based off what you know, what do you think the book will be about, and like here's some general questions to kind of get you thinking. So there's a few things that like we won't do on here, like the pair share right, you know, discuss your answer with the peers. What did you agree and disagree with? Like we'll skip that. However, like this part in the middle, I think would be, you know, really good for him to do. Then it has discussion questions. So as you're reading, you know, what do you think? There's rhetoric analysis. This is another day. So see, these in the packet when I purchased it were broken down onto the different days. So on like one day you were supposed to do the rhetoric analysis. You know, on one day you were supposed to do the vocabulary. On one day you were supposed to do the discussion questions. Like it was broken down over 5 days. It did include a writing activity as well. So writing a persuasive case for a cause you believe in. And at this point, I think this would be a good one to have him do a short writing assignment for. Like give him 2 days to be able to put this together. And then there is just a quiz to, you know, make sure to check his reading. So with these ones, my thought is to actually take the 5-day schedule that they had, but then split it so he gets 2 days for each of those. So 2 days to do that selected reading and then that selected activity. And so I've got the kind of the teacher pages for these on my computer, and then I will split them up a little bit longer. So that's kind of what I'm going to do with the 5-day one. But I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to skip ahead to one that's a little bit longer. This is the Copper Sun book. So this one, I actually just finished reading it last month. Boy, oh boy, was this a good book. It was so good. So good. So I found a study for this book, and it was a long one. I have planned for 3 weeks on this book. Getting through that book reading wise in 3 weeks, not a problem at all. But to make sure that we're utilizing a lot of this, I thought, well, we'll spread it out. So again, researching on the author, and then it has the parts of the packet split up kind of based on the parts of the book. The book jumps from the perspective of one person to another, so it has it sorted into different parts. So we go between Amari and the other main character of the book, and I can't remember her name right now, Molly or something like that. So vocabulary again, and then there are basically like chapter reviews, so chapter by chapter. So this is just kind of a mix of different kinds of questions. Like I thought that was cool. It's not just who was doing this and who is this person and whatnot, but also, here, chapter 2, it says, read back over the slaughter that takes place from the time the first shot rings out. What is the pacing like? Does Sharon Draper, that's the author, seem to speed the pacing of the story up here or slow it down? What is the effect of this? So I think that's really cool because you're looking at, you know, analyzing what you just read and thinking like, oh yeah, how did that make me feel, or how did it make me perceive it, and things like that. And then at the end, there is an option for a final project. So there's a test, and then it gives this idea on doing a slideshow final project. I don't know if we'll do a slideshow final project or if I'll have him do some sort of a writing assignment. If we are through the little mini essay writing unit he's done in writing, I probably will have him do a 5-paragraph essay instead of a slideshow project. I'm not a big fan of slideshow projects. I know that in schools they do them a lot, but I don't feel like that's any kind of a challenge, really. I would rather him have a specific topic for a paper and work on that. And while, you know, we maybe finish up the novel at a certain point and we're finishing up the discussion questions, I will most likely give him a little extra time, a couple extra days to get that 5-paragraph essay done and turned in to make sure that it's, done really well. So that's obviously a little bit of a longer one to try to space out. So I've given us 21 days. I'm sorry, I keep bumping the camera. My apologies. I've given us 21 days to get through Copper Sun. Oh gosh, no. I totally screwed that up. Guys, work with me here. I had 3 weeks planned. That's 15 days. Oh, shoot. I don't know why I was thinking 20 days. Well, here we go. Okay, so 4 weeks would give us 20 days. So we still can't do 2 days per part. All right. I'm going to sip my coffee and think on this, and I'll tell you what I come up with. Okay, the coffee definitely helped my brain. I don't know why I was thinking that I had more days assigned to this book than what I actually had. This is lesson planning in real time, right? I haven't done any of this in advance. I'm working on it like on the screen with you guys here, so you can see kind of my process, right? Anyways, so I looked back through, and rather than splitting this book up by parts, I know like the discussion questions split it up by parts. I looked back through in the chapters. So this book is divided into 42 chapters, but they're fairly short chapters. Now, if we do 3 chapters a day, then that is 14 days, right? 14 times 3 is 42. So that would give us 14 days. So that would take almost 3 weeks. Plus, that gives us time to work in the extra things. That gives us another, if we do this over 4 weeks, it gives us 6 days to work in the final writing assignment, which will probably be like 2 days. That gives me 4 days. A day to do the different research things. So there's a section in here where you're doing research on the author, and then like an introduction. So that's going to be day 1, right? So 3 more days then. There's a research on this Cape, like where they come to, and then there's research on the slave trade itself. So we'll have those. And then we'll work in some of like the extra pages as far as like the character analysis and things like that. So that is what I will do, is I'll assign 3 chapters a day of reading, and then the corresponding, discussion questions. So it might be, in some points there'll probably be days where he's finishing up discussion questions on one part and then starting discussion questions on the next part. But, he can kind of follow along with where he's at in here and do that. And then I'll make sure to like note that on his assignment page. So that is what we are going to do on that one. So you can see the novel studies are all a little bit different, whether it was for like the play, the longer novel, those shorter 5-day studies. And it takes a little bit of time to just kind of look at it and figure out like, how am I going to break this down and have my student read through it. I mean, he's going to do quite a bit of book reading this year, but this is also the entirety of his literature curriculum. We're working through a bunch of different things. We're going to do we're doing a play, a short story, we're doing poetry. I mean, he's going to read quite a few different books over the course of this year. But I think it'll be really good for him. I think he's going to have some challenging reads he's going to do. And I think that the different types of approaches of these different novel studies will keep his interest. When we were doing things through like BJU before, it was very much the same every single unit. You had check your understanding questions. We had thinking zone questions. You had very similar types of worksheets kind of repeating over and over again. And I think just, having slightly different versions of things will just help him. He is one who, he needs that like change in the different types of stimulation when he's doing learning. And I also think finding some videos for him to do will be helpful as well. So I'm going to go ahead and start typing things into my lesson planner based on kind of what I kind of talked through with you guys here. And then I'll do a little bit of hunting on YouTube to find some videos to link and some maybe different places we can do some research. for him, or some places websites I can bookmark for him to use for research and for background information. So a little bit of work for me on the front end of things to, get him ready for this. And then as we kind of go into the school year, I'll keep you guys posted on how this all goes. I like to do day in the life videos and quarterly updates and things like that. So I will let you know how this all ends up playing out. Do we stay on schedule? Do we have to change things as we go? Are we going to do all of the books? Are we going to take out some of those bonus books? This will be an interesting experiment for us, because it's the first time that we've just decided no formal literature curriculum. We're going to kind of build it ourselves, but I think it's going to be good. I'm very optimistic on this. All right, that wraps things up on lesson planning for literature for this year. Now, obviously, there are still many more subjects that I need to get prepared for my kids for this year, but this was one that I knew was going to take me a little bit longer, because there's just a bit that goes into taking a unit study or a novel study that doesn't have a set schedule and figuring out how you want to break it down and make it work for your student. I do hope that it's been helpful to kind of see me go through this process, and shows you that you can definitely incorporate these into your homeschool in a fairly easy manner. If you have any questions for me, or if you want to know where I have found some of my favorite novel studies, drop a comment down below. Or if you have favorite sources for novel and book studies, let me know what you have found and where. I'm always looking for great new ideas and resources to use with my own teens. Thanks so much for joining me for today's video, everybody. I will see you in the next one, and until then, happy homeschooling.